Chief Futurist at Futurist.com, researcher, keynote speaker, and author Nikolas Badminton joining us on Canada Now for his weekly visit. Nick, it's been crazy hot in India. March was the hottest in 122 years.
Yeah, and it's not going to get cooler. You know, there's this narrative around, you know, if we interject and we change how the economy works and get off of fossil fuels, you know, things are going to redress themselves. They're not. It's going to get warmer and warmer, and it's not even the hot season yet, right? Yeah. So this is a really interesting signal for me, right? By 2030, they think that India is going to be the number 2 global economy. That's by GDP. Like China will be number 1, India number 2, United States number 3. It's not going to get cooler. It's likely going to get warmer. We've got huge populations and huge population growth in these places. So I pulled some stats to sort of talk about it a little bit. Yeah. If you look at Mumbai, Delhi, and Kolkata, these are going to grow exponentially over the next sort of 20 to 30 years. Mumbai by 2050 is going to be 42 million people. Delhi is going to be 36 million people. Kolkata is going to be 33 million people. And if you look over to like Bangladesh, right, that's going to be 35 million people. So what we've got a country that's sort of the big, fat, hairy canary in the coal mine, showing us mega populations, huge global economies, massive disruption from climate change and warming, and what's going to happen next. And it's fascinating to look at, and it's also terrifying as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned a number of people that cities in that country are going to see, but climate might have something to say about that, because if they don't mitigate the high temperatures and heat waves, people will die. It's that simple, Nick. India's average temperatures rose by more than 0.5 degrees between 1960 and 2009. The probability of a massive heat-related mortality event, that's defined as more than 100 deaths, shot up by as much as 146%.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? I mean, even in Canada, we saw these heat domes and whatever happened in BC last year, and like the amount of people that died is insane. The amount of people that got sick, like, and you know, these are our vulnerable populations. Shift back to what we're talking about with India. Yeah, you know, I sort of speculate. You know, is this the beginning of nighttime economies? You know, the air conditioning business is just going to be one of the most valuable businesses in the world in these places. I did some keynotes on HVAC and this kind of thing last year. And it was just like, these are the places that are going to need more help. It's interesting, indigenous populations and people in the Middle East and whatever, they've got these ways of building buildings that I think that we're going to regress back into, that uses like pools of water inside and airflow and all sorts of interesting things. So that it's now is the point when the smart engineers and humanity and governments and people start thinking about different kinds of solutions, because it's not going to get cooler. And it's going to be interesting to see what kind of solutions are going to sort of come to pass. At the beginning, there's going to be the technological HVAC solutions, because we're living in these sort of buildings and settlements that aren't built to be efficient around airflow and natural cooling, to sort of a big shift towards a new way of using airflow naturally and new kinds of infrastructure. So the next sort of 20, 30 years is going to be really fascinating in this place.
Yeah, and I wonder with a nighttime economy what that's going to do for farming, because if you work outside, it's just too hot. Like it's gotten to a point now, like we've seen it in March in India, where if, you know, it's 10 a.m., everybody inside. We're not doing any work until the evening. So what's going to be done about farming if you can't work all day, every day?
Yeah, and you know, this heat is going to affect farming as well directly. So it's really interesting. You know, I mean, you know, agriculture at scale, feeding global populations, has been the thing that's grown the world in terms of population, in terms of economy, in terms of innovation, in terms of everything for the last 10 to 12,000 years. What's interesting is if you go back like 10, 12,000 years to the big cities that popped up, and this is all in the Middle East, like Uruk and whatever, you know, these places have been dealing with like heating for a very, very long period of time, right? Yeah. So it's like they actually built infrastructure to deal with that. And now what we've got is we've got legacy infrastructure built because of, you know, it's cheap or it's fast to deploy or whatever, that just isn't fit for purpose. So infrastructure, construction, whatever. It's going to be a huge boom industry in places like this over the next few years.
So besides local weather conditions, Nick, scientists say the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is contributing to India's increased temperatures.
Right.
It's not raining enough. So is the toothpaste out of the tube as far as we got to help out India?
We got to help out India. You know what? It's the global network of collaboration is kind of at a precipice right now. If you look at sort of all of the challenges, even in the past sort of 120 years or so, East versus West, Europe versus the UK and the US, Asia's dynamics, the exploitation of Africa. How are we all going to step up, and how are we going to work together? Right now, what we're seeing is a lot of challenges, especially with the Russia-Ukraine conflict as well, and the alliances that are being sort of built around that, and the dynamics that are changing from around water, energy, food, and waste, and these large countries like India is getting really interesting. I mean, now's the time to be in geopolitical science and to work on this. And I speak to my clients all the time because it's ripple effects. Something that happens in India is going to have a ripple effect across the region, and then down into Africa, and then down into the rest of the world. Something that happens in like Ukraine and Russia, whether it's like fertilizer supply or wheat supply or whatever, is going to have a knock-on effect to all those parts of the world. So, the idea of globalization is dead. We need a new paradigm of collaboration, and we need a new paradigm of global peace now and forever, right?
Well, on top of that, this is a topic when we talk about climate change and what can be done. Some find it exhausting. Some find it very overwhelming. And in a couple of weeks or so, Nick, I'm going to be having Britt Ray join us on the show, and she's an author and leading researcher at the intersection of mental health and climate change. Maybe you heard of her. She's written a book called Generation Dread. So she talks about mental health with climate change and kind of brings forth she kind of marries science with the emotions that we're feeling. But one of the things I'm going to ask her about is whether or not eco-anxiety can get so high that it leads to even more avoidance. Do you think we're going to get to that point where it just gets so bad that we just avoid the topic altogether?
We can't.
We can't, no.
We can't. I mean, here's a call to action. Do not avoid those conversations.
Yeah.
I've stood on stages for the past 6 or 7 years, and I've stood in rooms with fossil fuel companies, with people in large industry, with people that cause a lot of pollution. And I've never once stepped back from the conversation, to the point where these people will like castigate me, not speak to me, not let me sit next to them at the airport as we're flying home from conferences in places like Prince George. These are the pipeline people, right? Yeah. There are organizations, and it's like, you know what? This is why I do what I do. And I stand on stage, and I have platforms like speaking to you on radio and TV. And this is why I speak very frankly and honestly about where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do. Because if people like me don't do it, then, that's thousands of people that don't hear the truth. Think about those thousands of people all having one conversation a week around the seriousness of climate change and what we need to do. And that ripple effect is the kind of thing that we need. I'm not saying that I'm the progenitor. I'm just the messenger. And this is why I work with the United Nations and a whole number of things. There's a program that I helped establish within the United Nations framework for climate change, called Resilience Frontiers. And it's the realism that the world is getting hotter and there's pathways to our futures, and we need to build resiliency. And it's tough. And we're doing work on an ongoing basis to try and, open the minds of governmental leaders to start investing in the right kinds of ways.
Absolutely. Chief Futurist at futurist.com, researcher, keynote speaker, author Nikolas Badminton. Nick, always a pleasure, man. We'll talk again next week.
Yeah, we definitely will talk again next week, Jeff. Take care.